Hey everybody, we're back and I've got a dog this time.
I can't see your face there, Tristan. You appear to have converted into a pupper.
Yeah, this is Hazel. She's not feeling great this morning, so while the intro music was playing, she came and crawled into my lap.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so that's cute. We'll deal with this as the show goes. Hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for GPS Live for the week of September 8th. In the year of our Lord 2023, all of that jazz. My name is Tristan Morris.
And I am Jonathan Singer.
And we are here to talk about some cybersecurity news and cover down on that stuff. If you are watching this live, thank you so much. If you are watching on demand, we also thank you for giving us a bit of your time. The comments are open. We can see those as you guys bring them in. We love involving you in the conversation. Even if you're watching on demand, we love to see what you guys were thinking. Hazel, you can't keep... Okay. And we are also joined in the background by our newly minted producer, Ben.
Hey, look, it's producer Ben.
And
Hello, everyone.
yeah, okay. All right. So we're going to talk about some interesting stuff this week. We actually have a lot more stories than normal, and we're going to roll some of them together because they cover some of the same things. But before we get started on that, what we need to cover down is that our views and opinions are our own. We're just two dudes talking about cybersecurity. I almost said two dads, which is not true. But we're two guys talking.
You're a pup dad.
I'm a pup dad. Yeah, sure. That's the most millennial thing that we could possibly say.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. But anyway, Jonathan, what do we got? Oh, hey, Ernest, a happy Friday to you as well.
There we go.
So yeah, I think our first story is pretty interesting, and you dropped it in the chat. This is one that I saw earlier this week too, and was like, I feel like this is going to be a great one. And I got to Slack, and you had already put it there. So
yeah. So to kind of cruise control right into where we're going with things here.
nice.
Yeah, I saw this story early on in the week, and it kind of really triggered me that it had to be on the show. Because modern cars, as many of our viewers may know, are basically computers these days. And I'm not talking like, okay, maybe it's not like a laptop, like in your passenger seat, like a police car. But all these modules across the cars are computers. I mean, look at freaking Teslas. They've got cameras out the wazoo.
Yeah.
And so coming to us from The Verge is an interesting study put out by the great folks over at the Mozilla Foundation. And they said that and I'm going to tell you this, all 25 brands that it reviewed had glaring privacy concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, they're rivaling some of the worst privacy violators in the internet. And in a strange way, this is kind of not as surprising, but also, what the heck? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing is that a lot of these features and a lot of this tech that is being used for this kind of privacy monitoring is like started to become ubiquitous in cars before people were really paying attention to the ideas of like, oh, where's my info going? Where does like personal stuff about me live? And so now these are just like standard expected features in cars, right? So you've got things like, I mean, you can go back as starting with something like OnStar, right? OnStar just needed to know like, hey, have you been in a crash? What's your location? We can get EMS to you, all of that.
Yeah.
But to do that, it constantly had to be tracking. But that started before we really had like high bandwidth data that was just available everywhere.
Yeah. And right shortly after that, then we started to see the cars that were like, hey, you're due for an oil change, or you have some kind of check engine light. And that information was now being beamed back to the mothership and over to a local dealership to harass you to come in and get some services done. Right. And this just grew out of control.
It grew out of control. I mean, to the point now that like, I don't want to put any one particular company on blast, right? But suffice to say, there's an electric truck company that I am very interested in, that I really would love one of their trucks, but I refuse almost to even like consider it, even if I could afford it, because they won't allow Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in their systems, because they want to completely own the entertainment system, because they want to be able to track and sell information about what you're listening to and what you're what kind of entertainment you consume while you are using the vehicle. And so what Mozilla found, though, with a lot of these manufacturers and a lot of the cars that they were looking at, is that some of these are sending gigabytes of data uh,
Yeah.
back to the manufacturers of these cars. Everything from your driving habits to where you're driving and stopping, right? And you start thinking about the number of sensors that are in there, right? Like how many of us have newer cars that have seatbelt sensors in the passenger seat? And if you put your laptop down on the passenger seat, it starts digging at you because it thinks there's a person there, right? So now you're looking at stuff like, well, how many other sensors are in the car to monitor weight distribution and such? And you just went to Target and then stayed there for an hour, and then they can tell you put 10 bags of stuff in your car, right? They're looking at these kinds of things. But beyond that, the privacy agreements that these companies have you sign, because they have to have you sign these, EULAs basically. And it's part of the purchase agreement. And I think it was Subaru, I believe, was the one that they really called out as having an egregious amount of data that they allowed themselves to collect. Everything from like your driving activity to your health metrics.
Are you talking about that one specific metric?
Yeah, and then one specific metric. I mean, I think we're all adults here. We could probably just say, like, the contract calls out that they're allowed to collect information about sexual activity, which is really
it wasn't Subaru, but it was a couple of other Asian car brands.
Okay.
That particularly called that one out.
But it was very strange. And then when they were reached for comment, they said, "Oh, but of course, like, we wouldn't actually collect that, and even if we did, we wouldn't actually do anything with it." Which, like, it's one of those things where it's like, well, okay, then, but why have it signed in there? And I think the really interesting thing that was called out in a one tech reporter's TikTok that I was watching about this is, which, speaking of data privacy concerns, as I talk about watching things on TikTok, was that he called out that they technically put into the contracts for a lot of these that any passenger who gets in your car is considered a user, and therefore de facto by default is agreeing to the terms in that agreement. And so what he was pointing out is like, yeah, because we all remember the last time we got in an Uber and we were informed by our driver of all of the monitoring capabilities of that car, and that our data might be sent to the manufacturer. Wait, that's never happened. So
Look,
just really egregious.
Rideshare apps may have their own settings, data privacy issues already to begin with. But let's take a Kornacki perspective on this real quickly. 84% of the car brands share your personal data with either service providers, data brokers, remember those people, and other potential sketchy businesses that are out there, harvesting this stuff. And on top of that, with 76% claiming outright in terms, claiming the right to sell that personal data. So we've gone beyond just sharing it as part of some kind of business agreement to 3/4 are just like, by the way, so you bought this car, we also now have a new revenue stream. Not to say that I'm also really, upset about all this freemium stuff that cars are doing today anyways, where it's like, hey, you got to pay extra to use the seat heater, although it's physically already installed in the car. Don't get me started on that ridiculousness.
Which, to be fair, BMW just dropped that requirement.
I know. That wasn't the news also.
Backlash. It's so good.
Yeah. But no, like, we've seen this kind of model already in a lot of other products and devices that we're using today, right? Smart TVs are collecting everything that you're watching and sending that data off to either advertisers or their sharing partners. When you use all the different music apps, everything from Apple Music and Spotify, we're also seeing this in your, other random devices around your house, whether it has a microphone and it's listening in on things for particular audio tones or cues. I mean, pretty much every smart device today isn't just collecting data to make you a better consumer for their particular product. They're making you a product that they can resell. How do you think freaking TVs are so cheap these days? Because they make it elsewhere.
Yeah. even to up to and including the fact that there is now a free TV that you can get that has a second screen underneath the main screen that is dedicated to showing ads.
Yeah.
um,
But cars are not getting any cheaper, sadly.
yeah,
They are just
sadly.
becoming alternative revenue streams.
Right. Yeah, and Mike mentions in the comments that's why I drive a 10-year-old car for the privacy concerns. That's definitely why I drive 15-year-old car. It's only the privacy concerns and not the fact that I refuse to pay $40,000 for a car.
40. Have you seen them lately?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a really interesting story to kind of like keep an eye on, but like from the the perspective that we would normally want to take, right, from cybersecurity's perspective, specifically for organizations, this becomes a concern, I think, in a large way when you think about companies that maintain fleets of
Oh yeah.
company cars, right? What are they agreeing to? Where's the data that of all of their employees being sent to, right? What are you exposing your employees to? What are you exposing your company to? But also thinking about that beyond just the cars, and going into like all of the devices, like you mentioned, right? Everything that is that has the ability to communicate with the internet is collecting data and selling it at this point. So what are you bringing into your organization or allowing in your organization that anyone could theoretically go purchase because it's being sold through a data broker?
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff. But you mentioned TVs there, so I think I want to like jump into the next one because that's a great segue.
Yeah.
Feels intentional, almost. Our next story was coming to us from the Hacker News. And this one is a kind of a return of the Mirai botnet coming back up in a new version, a new variant called Pandora. For those unfamiliar, which I would hope that everyone watching would be at least somewhat familiar with Mirai, massive botnet has been, I guess, counter-offensive quite a bit over the last few years. Right, there's been a lot of work put into trying to dismantle and monitor the Mirai botnet. So their new variant Pandora is specifically targeting Android TV for cyber attacks. So Jonathan, what's the down on this one? You had a little bit more information on it.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Mirai is not necessarily a new name, especially over here on our GPS live show. In fact, if those recall, it's very much an IoT style botnet targeting all kinds of stuff like baby monitors and routers and DVRs and cameras and even environmental monitoring and smoke detectors. It loves the fact that some of these more basic, forgotten about systems are still computers. And so
Yeah.
this kind of reemergence, calling itself Pandora, is going after Android based TVs. And it's basically making itself embedded in a number of different downloadable applications and firmware updates. And once it's on the system, you're basically back in the DDoS game. It joins the botnet and becomes one of these victims that contacts a remote command and control center and waits for the call to start harassing others on the internet.
Yeah. So a lot of this in this recent campaign that they're looking at has been it looks like the apps that are being used to trick people into installing this botnet, right? They're prepackaged apps. Most of them seem to be targeting Spanish speaking users, right? Latino video on demand, Tele Latino, UniTV, right? These are all Spanish speaking applications and services. But the interesting thing about it is as a target, Android TV boxes, like that is an incredibly powerful vector to go after, because that's everything from like I was mentioning earlier, I have a new projector as my primary screen downstairs in my living room. Android TV built in. Most Samsung TVs these days, LG TVs, a lot of them, Android TV just built in there as part of the OS. If you've got everything from like a Chromecast, you got Android TV right there, right? But also, it's something like the NVIDIA Shield Pro, which is like my streaming box of choice downstairs. That's actually really powerful as far as like an IoT device goes, right? That thing, it's capable of running actual high fidelity games, especially some of it through GeForce's GeForce Now, I think it's called, like the streaming service, so that like the games are being run off site and I'm just seeing the video feed of it, but that's still unpacking a high definition signal and sending extremely low latency commands back to that server. So like if you want to use that to run a DDoS campaign, that's a pretty powerful box to target.
Yeah, most of these Android TV boxes, especially those in some of the countries outside of America, are fairly basic in their platform. They're running ARM-based processors. They're very simplistic in the fact that you usually, buy them already with Android installed, and you never really do anything from there. It kind of leaves oftentimes a lot of different vulnerabilities open,
Yep.
whether the device may go end of life and no longer receive Android updates, which we do already see in many phone devices today, on
Right.
top of the fact that sometimes people use these Android TV devices for pirating television. And so they're already downloading nefarious applications outside of the standard App Store market. And when you're moving off of the Play Store, that Google does try to monitor and keep some of the bad stuff out of, you entirely open yourself up to different types of backdoored applications,
Right.
intentionally malicious applications, and things that are intended, just like this Pandora botnet, to just take over your device and turn it into a zombie.
Yeah, and a lot of these applications that are being used to install and enslave, I guess, is that the term? Like add
Sure.
these things to the botnet, right? Um, those applications are often for pirated video content, so they are already bypassing any protections that like might exist on a Google Play Store to look for malicious activity, because you would have to sideload them anyway if you're looking to do pirated video content. So you're already stepping outside the bounds of protection there, and then like you mentioned, right, especially targeting these, there are a dime a dozen streaming boxes, but they all
Oh
at
yeah,
least have to have the capability in order to run Android TV. They have to meet a minimum threshold of capabilities. So they all have to have the ability to have a process a data connection that can at least stream high definition video, which is more than enough to run a great DDoS bot off of that device. Um,
absolutely.
so again, right, you're looking at stuff like, if you are in an office and you have TVs and you are utilizing streaming boxes of any kind for different purposes, right? Make sure that you know exactly which services you're using, what you're installing on those, and monitoring those connections and trying to probably set up some custom rules, I would say, for any TVs that you have in your office that use Android TV or anything like that, to like monitor their specific network traffic and make sure that they're not being utilized in something like a botnet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, kind of talking about massive cyber criminal networks.
Massive
This
criminal networks and
this
compromises.
this does help us kind of pivot into our next story,
Yeah.
which is coming to us from Dark Reading, specifically about the Well Gang, and what they're doing around 365. And this isn't just your average. I mean, there isn't really an average, but we'll say phishing as a service. They are taking this to a whole nother level, right? What are we
Right.
seeing here?
Yeah. So well stylized W3LL, which I am choosing in my brain to list as well, um, is a fairly sprawling campaign and threat actor. Um, that is spreading pretty quickly, so quickly, in fact, that they have targeted at least 56,000 Microsoft Office 365 accounts since last October. So in just a year, 56,000 accounts have been targeted, and they have a success rate of just over 14%. So I can't do that math right now in my head. Hey, producer Ben, you want to pull up a calculator and figure out what 14% of 56,000 is for us real quick? Um, I can see him doing it. You got that answer for us there, Ben?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Great.
Cool. All
Okay.
right, let me know. So they've been pretty successful, but one of the really interesting things about this is that they have created a really successful private underground market that enjoys the stewardship of more than 500 cyber criminals,
Mhm.
according to this article. And they're utilizing the really sophisticated phishing kit called Well Panel to set up their campaigns. What are some of the interesting things about Well Panel, John?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted system here. We're talking not just, a standard marketplace where you can go on and maybe execute a phishing campaign or purchase into some kind of phishing network, but this is a fully compatible custom tool set that covers everything from, we're talking business email compromise, to different types of customization around phishing, to even modules around SMTP servers. It looks like vulnerability scanners are going to be in here,
Yeah.
different link stagers. And there's also, just to call out, over 850 unique phishing websites for data collection as part of this tool set too. Um, they call this just massive, you know, panel of capabilities around MFA bypass. And they tout 17 different modules that have different capabilities can be used by these malicious actors.
Yeah, and the thing I think that's about this is that like they have gone under the radar apparently for about 6 years now, because they've been highly secretive. Oh, it looks like producer Ben had an answer for us. What was that, Ben?
It's 7,840.
Okay, 7,840. Thanks, Ben. 7,840 accounts successfully compromised there. But yeah, so they've managed to fly under the radar for about 6 years, because they have asked their customers to refrain from spreading word about it and advertising it. They don't do any kind of advertising or recruiting, unlike some of the, maybe some of the ransomware gangs that we've seen out there who are much more vocal about like, hey, if you want to use us, go ahead. They've asked people to keep it under wraps. And so it's been used by like a pretty small circle of highly trusted business email compromise criminals. And every copy of Well Panel, it's interesting, they've built in, the same protections that major software would use. It has to be enabled through a token-based activation. So you can't just grab Well Panel and use it. You have to go through them to get it, which means you have to go through this kind of circle of trust, which, speaking of, is one of the interesting things here is that they have a referral program, where you can get through their phishing as a service affiliates who get a 70-30 split of revenue. They also offer a 10% referral bonus for bringing other trusted affiliates into the community. So according to the article on Dark Reading, collectively the campaigns have netted about $500,000 just for the Well crew since last October.
Yeah, you mentioned there this has been going on for a couple of years. We're talking more specifically since about 2018. They've started building out the panel. It has evolved significantly, into this multifaceted business email compromise ecosystem. They even have customer support, which we've talked about when it comes to different ransomware and other cyber criminal groups. Having things like customer support seems to actually go a long way in successful campaigns, because that means that you're able, well, at least this is customer support for other cyber criminals, but it's not unheard of in this kind of industry. They're really starting to advertise themselves within their own little market, right, to do stuff like data theft, fake invoice scams, account owner impersonations, or even malware distribution. All of those are part of the feature-rich tool set coming to us with all the different functionality and mechanisms that they offer.
Yeah, and it's something to pay attention to, because when you're looking at a tool like this that covers the entire beginning to end process of business email compromise, and tools like this are becoming more and more readily available, right? You're not really dealing with like this is the point now where it's like, oh, any script kiddie can get access to tools like this and run a successful campaign, right? Obviously, people who are more experienced and have more knowledge of kind of how to play that game are going to be more successful in those endeavors. But tools like this make it so easy for anyone to target your organization. So you have to be monitoring your email security very closely. You have to be looking for things like strange logins, bad credentials, anything like that that's floating around. And take into account that like stuff like this is just going to become more prolific over time. But speaking of business email compromise and
is your dog snoring?
Yeah, she's fallen. She is straight up fallen asleep on my arm, and I'm so sorry that anyone has to hear that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure it wasn't you.
Yeah, no, I'm not dying over here. Okay, I woke her up. Um, she is so comfortable right now. But speaking of phishing and email compromise, that brings us to our last story of the week, which is our feel-good story. And we're going to combine this with a not so feel good story. But so let's start with that not so feel good first. Is that there's a new phishing campaign that is being launched via Google Looker Studio. This is a product that I didn't know existed until I saw this
I
story.
never heard of it until today.
So Looker Studio is a tool that allows you to build charts and graphs and presentations and such, and then send them out to folks for them to review. And so this new phishing campaign has been launched, targeting none other than investment folks, right? People who are looking to turn $1 into 100. And so it is a presentation built through Google Looker Studio that is just promising incredible returns in certain investments, right? But as soon as you get there, it redirects you to a login page that says you have to enter your credentials. Once you do that, it obviously steals them. And then the attackers can do what they want with it. But the interesting thing about it is that it is bypassing email security features because it is being sent through Looker Studio, which means it's coming from a google.com subdomain, which most places just automatically greenlight. And then it's bypassing security features to see if message contents have been tampered with, again, because it's coming from trusted domains. So they have found a way to abuse Google's trust and Google's status within the industry so that they can directly target people and grab their login credentials. So this is something to be looking out for. But the good news is that Google is enabling a host of new features in Chrome for real-time phishing protection. So Jonathan, let's run through this one.
Yeah, and many of you may already be familiar with that red screen that pops up, right? That safe browsing that Google Chrome's been using since about 2007, actually. Wow, been around for a while. But we're taking it to a whole nother level, right? And the kind of the way we're talking about here is you'll check if a domain that you're visiting is within a local list of malicious URLs. And if it is, it blocks it. But that list is hosted locally. And so if it doesn't get updated regularly, you may be missing out on some of the latest, I don't know, fast flux things that come flying out of the TLDs these days, as far as new stuff coming out. So this enhanced safe browsing is hitting the streets for everyone. What we're going to see is that it's going to be updated 30 to 60 minutes, and even down to 10 minutes here. So these real-time lists are pretty much going to be flying into our systems, helping Google block known bad sites.
Right. So this is doing a check against cloud-based lists that Google is going to be maintaining. It's interesting to me that it is now that we're moving to that, when we figured out, a decade ago that local signature-based lists to protect against malware weren't gonna cut it, and so we needed to be using larger data sets. But so Google is now going to be checking against that cloud-based list. There's a trade-off in privacy, obviously, because now URLs that you visit are being sent back to Google, but that's not really a trade-off in privacy when you consider you're already using Google Chrome, if you're taking advantage of this feature. So, but it is just a new area that they're sending your information to. Speaking of information privacy. To check.
But I did want to pivot off of that. It is made very clear that Google is not going to be using the data submitted to the enhanced safe browsing feature in any other systems, including to deliver advertisements. So this will be an isolated system.
Right, exactly. But yeah, so it is really a great new feature set that they're bringing in to do protection in real time. Because like you said, every 30 to 60 minutes for those local lists to be updated is too long, considering most, according to this article, most phishing sites are only up for about 10 minutes from the moment that they are built. So being able to check in real time against these things is going to be huge. So with that, though,
it's that time.
It's that time. We are done with the show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've watched on demand, go ahead and leave some comments. Let us know what your thoughts were. Let us know if there are stories that you would love to see covered, and if they fit into what we can do next week, then we will bring those in. With that, until next time, I have been and will continue to be Tristan Morris.
And I'm Jonathan Singer.
And producer Ben is waving at his camera, and we will see you next time.